Hi, it's Charlie O'Donnell from Brooklyn Bridge Ventures. I'm super excited to bring you another lunchtime stack up. This time we're going to be focused on engineering, and we've got Chris from Landis here who is going to talk about their team's path to 10x engineering and some of the things that they've learned along the way. Since this is a topic that I am the least helpful on, I'm going to get out of the way as quickly as possible. I'll let you put up whatever you want to put up on the screen and take it away. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to get to talk about 10x. I see that there's already comments in the feed, which is really exciting. I'm happy to be able to dive into the topic. So let me just share my screen and I will be able to open the slide deck. All right. Okay, so jumping in, I'm going to be talking about 10x engineering, how we've gotten down the path of being able to get to a point where we can see a 10x engineering team. Really, the idea is not just how 10x engineers as individuals can apply to engineering as a whole or to the company as a whole, but how 10x engineering as an entire team can make an even wider impact. And just to give you a bit about who I am, I'd like to just give a little story about my character. I spent my formative years of developing, going through websites like Stack Overflow or others like that, and actually seeking out posts where usually the only response was, oh, this isn't possible, we can't do this, it can't be done this way. And taking the time, sometimes days, sometimes longer, to be able to find a solution that really worked. And maybe they weren't always pretty, maybe they weren't always the most beautiful solutions, but I think it says something about who I am, which is that I really love the challenge and I love finding how to make things that seem impossible actually work. And, jumping into Landis as a concept and really how it's been an incredible setting for that. Landis, what we do, we turn renters into homeowners. And the concept there is that we guide people the entire way through. We want to make sure that they feel comforted and confident that they're going to be able to get to the end goal of actually being a homeowner. And the place where I really felt the impact, I have had what I like to call a breadth-first search approach to the industry. I've kind of been all over the place. And I think Landis was really the first company where I had that feeling of being connected to the mission. And so when I really felt that, and it was really recent to my joining the company, I was actually sitting in the office, right, long time before COVID had started, and the client success team was behind me, and they put a client on the phone, and I hear crying, and I turn around prepared for the worst, right? I'm expecting something awful, and when they had calmed down enough, I came to realize that they were actually crying out of happiness. And it was just a moment where I sat back in my chair and I said, oh, I can really understand why I'm here, why I'm building what I'm building, why we're building what we're building. And it really set the pace for me wanting to be that 10x engineer, which is something I've always had the goal of in my career. And it transformed it into, I want this company to be a success, and I want us to be a 10x engineering team as a whole. And so I really want to dive into the path that we've taken to get there and to give you tools on how to be able to find the same successes we've had and maybe to avoid some of the mistakes that we've made along the way. And so I will dive right into what the concept really means in itself, right? So we've probably read about what a 10x engineer on their own is, which is that it's an engineer who can do 10 times the amount of work as anyone else who is in the field. They have the output, and it's something where that person can end up being a lone wolf, right? You look for one person who can be your 10x engineer on your team. The goal that I have here is that we as Landis want to be able to encourage 10x engineering as a concept so that the entire team can have the output, 10 times the amount of output. And we've been lucky enough to be able to hire many 10x engineers who can have that on their own, but also to be able to have the ability to bring that all together. And I think, the founders have done a really amazing job, Tom and Cyril, of being able to embrace a culture of learning and that motivation and putting clients on the phone to really get us there. And why this is really relevant is that, especially from a startup culture, we want to be able to rapidly ideate and put things into production to see how our clients are going to react to something that we're building. And so being able to have a tight-knit team where we maybe have limited bandwidth, but we have the ability to rapidly go through processing, what it is that we need to get done is really important so that we don't have friction and we can actually keep that really streamlined function. And so it kind of has that really interesting caveat to it, where it allows us to have that rapid ideation without, the extra bandwidth that might be necessary. The other thing that becomes really important here is that growth can't be equivalent to scale. If we have one engineer who is able to service 10,000 clients, by the time we hit 1 million, it's just not going to be feasible that we have 100. So how do we get 10x so that we can have 10 engineers and hit that 1 million clients, or continue to even go beyond that point? And so how do we achieve this? Well, one of the things that I was talking about that I really felt at Landis was the motivation. And being able to sit down in the chair every single day and see everyone's faces around me on the engineering team and in the company at large, and how connected we are to the mission, keeping us all in touch with the business has made this a really great way for us to continue working together. And Tom, the founder that I work most closely with, has really been able to bring the business into something that we do, right? So he's been able to continually talk to us about what the reasons are for what we're building and to keep us connected to the people that we're building it for. And that motivation has really driven us to keep going and to work as hard as we can. Another side to this is also being able to remove ambiguity, knowing the goals as soon as they are presented. And a great way to do that is to have really good communication with your entire team. And the first engineer that we pulled into the team, his name is Kirill, and he and I have been able to create this dynamic between the two of us where we kind of work seamlessly. And a great example of this is when COVID actually started, we were so used to working in the office together and so used to being able to be side by side and just talk to each other continuously throughout the day that we actually started FaceTiming each other. Sometimes we just have FaceTime running and not even be talking, but it was just like being in the office next to each other. And being able to continue that and see that it was a seamless transition even into the remote world of COVID allowed us to continue being able to have the output, right? We were 2 engineers and we were outputting 5 products at that time. And we've grown from there and we've hired amazing people after that point and continued on that path to be able to hit 10x engineering. And a way that we've also been able to do this is by not fearing a refactor. We've made a lot of decisions that we have backtracked on or that haven't worked out in the long run. And we've been able to say, it's fine, we're still going to make the decision now and move forward. So an example of that is when we first started to deploy our services. We put them out on Lambda. We were trying to be as serverless as possible. And we used PM2 and EC2. And together that worked, but they fell over really often on the PM2. We ended up having to kick the box far more often than was good to be able to actually maintain the bandwidth. And the Lambda started to fall short when we needed to see things that were like socket connections, right? We wanted to be able to grab live data. Lambdas didn't really work well for that. And so we were able to pivot, and you know what? We put a lot of time and effort into PM2 and EC2, and we put a lot of time and effort into Lambda, but we pivoted into something called HashiStack by HashiCorp, which pretty much is similar to Kubernetes, gives us the ability to orchestrate that entire process. And making that decision, yes, there was lost work, but we had the decision already and we had the products already. So by not fearing that refactor, we were able to hit the ground running. And then when we got to a point where that no longer worked for us, we were able to pivot very quickly. And that really made a difference. Another way to achieve this is always do what makes sense. We had another engineer join us. She's a really interesting engineer, actually, where she really crosses the dynamic between data science and engineering. Her name is Jane. And I remember one of the first conversations that we were having, and she said, wait, your microservices are written in Node. We're doing data science, and a lot of data scientists are really familiar with Python. Shouldn't we be doing it in Python? And it became the thing that made sense. It became the logical conclusion. And so having someone on the team who has that voice to say what we are doing needs to make sense really was able to elevate the entire team and to bring us to that next level where we could say, okay, that's excellent. We can now do what makes sense and keep it going forward. And it removed the learning curve, right? So when we have anybody who needs to work with data or data science, they know Python, they know how to jump into it, and that works really well. And then another piece to this, running right into data science, we have an amazing data scientist. His name is Kane. And I think this concept of experimenting early is something that really fits into data science as a concept and something that he really brings to the table, which is the ability to be on the cutting edge, but maybe not the bleeding edge, right? As a 10x engineer, to elevate the entire team, he brings his understanding and his knowledge of data science, and he's able to wrap that into something that is something where we can continue to look forward and continue to look at all of our clients' data from a really unique perspective, and to do it while relying on services and technologies and tools that are stable and well-formed. And again, bringing all of that together, you can see that each piece along the way, we have the removal of ambiguity, we have the motivation, we have not fearing a refactor, experimenting early and doing what makes sense. Those things together are what has allowed us as an entire team and at large as an entire company to have success in being able to put out a lot of products. And in summary, 10x engineering, it's really about the team, right? It's about 10x engineering as a team. It's about that motivation and the transparency to fuel productivity. And I have a cliche at this point, which is to say that engineering is a team sport. And I really believe that. We've only been able to do what we have because of the amazing team that we have put together and the people that we work with who have these amazing ideas and can keep us all pushing ourselves to move forward. And it's about flexibility, about being able to make tech decisions, move forward with them. The tree that bends doesn't break is the quote I have here, and it's true. We've been able to see that every once in a while, if we've become too rigid in a decision, it's hurt us. And so we've been able to move forward and have more and more flexibility as we go, because we know that we have the ability to change and we have the ability to grow. And 10x engineering is something that we can continue to work on forever. It's something that is a goal we'll always be striving to achieve. And I love that, because engineering as a concept is something that I love continually working on. And that is the end of my spiel. I really hope that I was able to give everyone the tools and the concepts and the ways in which we've been able to bring the team together and make that concept a reality.
So I have a couple of questions about mission. It's something, without opening up a Pandora's box, it's something that has come up a lot this week. And the idea of the definition of the company's mission and people's relationship to it. There's just sort of a reality in startups that alignment around mission can be a little bit uneven, right? You've got founders that, the economic reality is that they own a much larger chunk of the company, and it is nice to be involved in sort of a startup's mission and to have some of that upside. But there's going to be a range of how people feel tied to that mission. And I'm curious as to what are some of the ways, because there's one argument that says, look, engineers just want to build good stuff and that's all they're focused on, and all of this other stuff is sort of superfluous. And there's another end of the spectrum that says people really want to be bought in on something larger. And not everyone is necessarily all the same, right? Like you probably have engineers that feel the way you do about, when somebody's able to get to home, and you've probably got other people that are just like knee deep in the code. So how do you balance that? And how do you sort of create a culture that is about the work, but doesn't feel dehumanizing, I guess, is the how I would position that.
Yeah, it's a really excellent question. And I think that it's something that we strive for all the time, and that has started from the top down. We looked at having a mission that was going to be aligned with the client, and that allowed everyone in the entire company, the founders, the client success team, business development, and the entire engineering team to understand it and to align with it, because we knew that it was going to work across the board. And being able to keep everyone, on board with that and to feel excited about it. I mean, things like having that connectivity right there. I've walked into startups where I've seen a literal wall between the client facing team and the engineering team. Breaking down that wall and being able to have the engineering team see the impact that they're having has really helped to be able to have some of the concepts where people would have come in and said, okay, I'm just here as an engineering job, and been able to say, wait, there's more. And to give them that feeling of, wait, there's more. And if you are faced with a person who says, no, I just want the engineering and I just want to make something amazing, the idea is to say, we are making that thing that is amazing because of what it can do. And so if you can make the client look at the application and say, wow, I understand my financial situation. Wow, I understand that I can get to being a homeowner. That's a success as an engineer. And so you can definitely align the mission with what it is that an engineer is looking to be able to have and to feel in pride of their own work as well. And it's really a process of being able to see that across the board. And I completely agree with you and love your perspective on this, in that everyone is different. And I think that's what makes a team great, is the fact that we're all different, and we do all have different motivations and different things that we're looking for in the job. And it's something that if you can work with instead of against, you'll be able to create that environment that you're looking for. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, sure. And it's interesting. I heard a really good piece of advice actually I was talking to another investor, and something that another team did, and your discussion about communication really made me think of it. One of the things that has happened over the last 6 months is that while we're connected, we're not necessarily connected in the same way, obviously. And one of the things that people sort of miss out in not being in an office, for example, is some of that, the osmosis of what goes on, and sort of the casual learning. And so one of the things that one of his teams did, which I thought was fascinating, is everybody has to have an open calendar for meetings. But not necessarily like, here's what I'm working on this afternoon, but more like, okay, I'm having this conversation with another person, whether it be a client or what have you. And everybody has sort of a phone directory, and or they could just sort of DM on Slack or what have you. And basically the rule is anybody can ask somebody else if they can listen in on a meeting. So for example, like if you're having a sales call and you're an engineer can basically say, hey, do you mind if I jump in on that meeting? But the way they do it is they dial into the Zoom. So this way, it's not like another person visually like sort of distracting from the meeting. They're just kind of listening in on the background. And it made me think of like when I was first, I was the first analyst at Union Square Ventures back in like 2005, which now seems like a million years ago. And I never took a meeting with a founder without either of the two partners, Brad or Fred, because I just wanted to learn and I just wanted to listen. And I know in this environment now, like you don't always know what's going on, and it would, unless you give that permission, it might be a little weird to be like, hey, I saw you have this meeting, can I jump in? Versus like if you see somebody in the hallway next to the conference room and they can sort of eyeball you and be like, oh yeah, you should pop into this. So I think there are ways that you can, sorry for the outside noise.
COVID world.
Increase that level of communication among teams in a in a structured communication way to say, hey, this doesn't happen on its own. So here's this way that, people should expect on both sides, and that it's sort of okay. Because otherwise, it might not be easy to hear what is going on with a customer, or what's going on with a sales team or a design team. And especially for new hires. I don't know if you guys have picked up anybody during this period of time, but I'd be curious as to how things like onboarding have changed during this period.
Yeah, we have, and I really love the insight, and the concept of being able to set the groundwork for that is really excellent, right? Being able to say this is not only acceptable but encouraged. And we have actually, we've hired a fair number of people during COVID, and the onboarding has been interesting. We've had really interesting ideas from everyone on the team. And again, it's always about involving everyone and getting all the ideas you can. And the people that we've brought on, both in and outside of the engineering team, one thing that they have done is either shadow and sit in on those calls because of that connectivity, or in some cases actually taking a call and picking up the phone and talking to a client to understand the situation. And it's unusual, I think, to see that. I know that my first reaction when it was presented as a concept for new hires to do that was, this seems very strange to have an engineer get on the phone with somebody. And you know what, it's everybody's different, right? And everybody learns in a different way. So for some people that was shadowing and being able to just hear the conversation. Slack, one of the things that we always try to do on that end is to keep everything in public channels so that everyone in the office can see it, right? It's almost like having an office away from the office. And I was saying, about the situation with Carol and myself when we first started COVID, we always had FaceTime open, and every once in a while we'll start a Slack call that will be with many people in the office, not because it's a meeting, but just to be able to have that connectivity, and if there's anything that needs to be discussed, it's an open platform for it. And I love the ideas that you're bringing to the table. These are things that I want to internalize and try to adopt and bring on board. Having the foundation to be able to have people feel more connected and feel comfortable being so is really an excellent point to make. I thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You'll pick up the more VCs you talk to is none of our ideas are actually original. It's just something that we picked up from a portfolio company. I mean, we might seem smart. It's really just a bunch of borrowing, like any great artist, basically. So it's not mine, and I wish I could give credit. I got to find out which portfolio company is doing that, because they definitely deserve credit, and it's a really great idea. One other question I have. On the recruiting side, is there anything in particular that you have picked up about the people who are most ready for this kind of growth? That you're essentially saying, hey, how do we get more out of our teams? And to some extent, you're trying to select for people who could just, I hate to say develop as a developer, but that's sort of what I'm getting at. That there's some people who they are what they are when you hire them, and they are solid, and there are other people that you wind up getting more out of over time because they sort of buy in. And is there anything that you sort of picked up on the recruiting side that can filter for that?
Yes, absolutely. It's another really great question. One of the ways that I like to approach the interview process is to see how comfortable people are outside of their comfort zone. And so we look for, and particularly thinking about the tech stack, we look for people who are going to be comfortable in full stack engineering, but everyone always has a niche. Everyone always has somewhere that they're really comfortable and somewhere that they have an expertise. And we want to bring that on board because it makes us that much better. But to drill down specifically into the point of whether or not they're going to have that growth mentality is by saying, okay, so you haven't worked on, front end so much. What would you like to work on? Is there any area that you haven't had exposure to that you would like to, that you've seen other people doing, and you want to be able to do that? And sometimes the response that I will receive for that is, oh no, I'm very comfortable in what it is that I'm working on. And this is amazing because it does reflect that there's somebody who has that expertise level and is comfortable in their niche. But to find the person with that growth aspect, the answer you look for is, oh yeah, I'm really interested in design. I know it's not really an engineering thing, but I love being able to look at UX and see how people interact with the product. Or, yeah, you know what? I shadowed a PM at the last company that I was at, and I was really excited to see how we could develop new features for clients, right? So those answers to the question of, what do you like doing? What do you want to do to push yourself outside of that comfort zone is a great way to get an answer and to put the person in a way, in a light to shine and to say what they enjoy doing. And it keeps them comfortable in the topic as well.
Yeah, I mean, curiosity essentially is what, filtering for curiosity, I think is important, because obviously things are going to change over time. You're going to wind up learning, installing some new stuff, and I think curiosity drives the desire to be better and to figure out something new and to ask questions. I also think there's something to be said for curious people tend to be connected to bigger groups of others and other groups of peers. They're always sort of asking questions. And what I've realized over the years is that's also it's like a side benefit for recruiting, right? Because if you hire, especially engineering, people who actively participate in communities of peers, it is much more likely that those people are going to make recommendations of other people in sourcing talent. So curiosity is good in its own right, but it's got this little side benefit of being able to kind of help source leads. Before I ask my last question, I want to just make sure if there's anybody in the group who wants to ask anything, feel free to kind of chime in. But one thing I would ask is, are there tools, either communication tools or organization and people management tools that you found either particularly helpful, where you're like, where we're big fans of product, we think this product has sort of helped us, or ones where you even want to just put out an ask to say, hey, this product doesn't help us connect as much as we want, or it doesn't help us focus as much as we want, and you're curious about trying other things?
Absolutely. I agree with you. There are tools that we use and work really well for us. We actually are using an interesting one for our ticket tracking system. It's called Linear, which has worked really well. We do things in cycles with t-shirt sizes so that we avoid kind of the daunting nature of having to put a time limit on items so that people can feel that they can work to their full productivity. But always looking for new tools. I think it's part of that curiosity, is always looking to be able to grab in new things. So any advice that we can pull from anyone else to be able to make what we're doing better and stronger is always something that we're looking to have. Pain points that we have seen in the process is usually around tooling itself when it comes to the engineering stack, right? As I was saying, one of the things that we've noticed is that tech decisions can seem daunting. It's on the slide right here. It's true. When we first jumped into Hashstack, we spent almost a month building it out, not knowing whether it was going to work or not. So and I'd worked with it some on my own, but in a production level setting, it's a different story. So I would love to hear if there's anybody on the phone who has tools that they love that work for them. I think one of the big ones for us would be something to whiteboard with, right? Mm-hmm. We don't have a whiteboarding tool that really is something that we can work with. I usually jump on and use like Draw.io and share my screen, and that's kind of how we've been doing it. But any suggestions there?
Yeah, sure. People definitely will, follow up or reach out. What's actually the best way to reach you if they have questions?
Absolutely. No, Chris at Landis.com. And I believe that it should be in the profile as well, and I can make sure that it's there. So just my first name at Landis.
So last question. So Alex asked, as a manager, dealing with turnover is always very difficult and time consuming. Have you picked up any ways to, prolong somebody's term at a company and try and, kind of keep people around versus job hopping?
Yeah, I can say that we are really fortunate to have an entire team who has been with us the entire time. Our engineering staff has we have not had turnover. And I think part of that is making everyone feel comfortable in the space that they're in, making them feel involved and making them know that they're supported. And I've noticed that at other companies that I've worked at where I've seen that higher level of turnover, there's been a lack of support from the management area or from other engineers on the team where that collaboration hasn't existed. And I think that breaking down that wall between management and engineering, right? I am an engineer and I work on a lot of the engineering products with the people that, are on the team. Being able to break that down and make them know that I'm always there to support them, that the founders have always the constant communication with them and that they're always there to support what they're doing is a way to make them feel like they want to stay and want to feel involved in the product and feel that what they're doing has that mission behind it. All of the above really makes that difference, I believe.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, listen, thanks so much for spending time with us today. Really appreciate all the good insight. Stay safe and, best of luck and continued success, keeping that team together and focused and supported. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem.
Stay safe.